Menan has been on a lot of trips in the last 5 days. I'm sitting in my favorite chair on the porch with a glass of dark beer, just 20 minutes after getting home. It occurs to me that our kids are becoming more independent. Like many other parents who just went through the same thing, my wife Amelia and I no longer have any children but ourselves. But I'm thrilled right now. Our trip began in Atlanta, Georgia, where Luke was going to go to Georgia Tech. We only had to change drivers once because it was easy to return our rental car there. Instead of going to Daytona Beach with our daughter Kelly the next day, we flew her to Gainesville to start her new life as a Gator in college. It was really nice to be close to Amelia during those 3 days. Amelia was very friendly. We had our first child when we were only 18, so even though we are 36 now, we still have a lot of and love. We stopped at an empty truck stop on our way home. Amelia laughed and said that she had meant to leave her underwear there. While Amelia took a shower upstairs, I sat in my chair and thought about good things. I was shocked to hear her hairdryer because she only used it before going to work or going out. I heard her going around in heels in the kitchen after the noise stopped. That wasn't like her. She usually wore soft slippers or went barefoot. It wasn't long before she called me and asked if I could come with her. With an empty glass in my hand, I got up from my chair and happily said I would. Amelia was sitting at the table in a new blouse and clean pants when I got to the kitchen. She brought me a mug of hot coffee and set it down in front of her seat. I wasn't sure what Amelia's serious attitude meant because she seemed focused and tense. I slowly sat down in the seat she had clearly marked for me while I waited for her to explain. I took Amelia's cup and sipped the strong, hot drink while asking her, "What's up, Amelia?" "I'm leaving you, Ellen," she said in a calm voice as she took the thick package. "I've got divorce papers here for you to go over and sign." I was so shocked that I couldn't say anything as she kept talking. It was like a loud, sudden blow. Even though I had never boxed before, I felt like a boxer who just got hit with a big blow and a missed uppercut. She pushed the limits toward me and kept making the same boring statements, which hit me like a pile driver in the head. She didn't seem to know at all how shocked I was. "All the divorce terms are spelled out in these papers. I'm not asking for anything from you. You can do whatever you want with my things here. Our savings are split, bills paid up to today, and I've canceled all joint credit cards. I've updated my address with everyone who needs to know. You can get more details from your lawyer. If you need anything from me, only contact me through my lawyer." After taking a deep breath, Amelia continued in her normal, calm, businesslike voice. "I got a paper that says you can't come near me once I go. It's in this envelope. I also changed my phone number, email, and closed all my old accounts." She thought I wouldn't answer, and I couldn't. I didn't say anything or move. I just looked at her. The coffee in front of me had not been touched much and was getting cold. She told my parents and our kids not to talk about me. They'll not help you even though they know what's going on. Amelia stopped squirming and looked at me straight in the eyes. She told me she was going to be with Charles full time because she loved him more than I did and wanted to be with him. She said goodbye and left. I asked her why when she opened her bag and looked at me. She said, "Nova," and then she slammed the door and drove off. I heard her shoes clicking, a car door closing, and the engine sound dying down as she drove away. That was the last time I saw or talked to Amelia for 16 months. I felt like Charles was like a father to me and my best friend for 18 years at work. Amelia and Diana, Charles's wife, became close while they were both pregnant. Diana was 22 and Amelia was a little over 18. Their daughter, Cassie, was born a day after our twins, which seemed like fate. This initial connection turned into a deep friendship, making our families almost inseparable. We spent weekends together, even though we lived just 2 blocks apart until we had a fight. The moment the twins came into our lives happened while both Amelia and I were in college. Amelia had always wanted to study business or business management, while I studied math with the help of a partial scholarship and played baseball on the college team. At that point, I hadn't decided what I wanted to do with my life. But when Amelia told me she was pregnant, I had to give up my plans and find work to support her. As their only child, I became the center of their attention. They welcomed me into the world later in life, when they were getting close to 40, and saw me as a precious blessing after years of wanting a child. Amelia had a brother named Tom, who was 10 years older than her. They weren't close because Tom went to college when Amelia was 8 and rarely came back home. Sadly, Tom died in a strange car accident right after finishing college. My parents gave us the house we had lived in for a long time as a wedding gift because they were moving south. I liked my job selling insurance policies at a local company. It didn't pay much at first, but if I sold a lot, I could make a lot more money, even though I had to work long hours, sometimes 12 hours a day, and on the weekends before the twins were born. Amelia worked part-time as a secretary and studied online to get better grades. Nova's accident happened 3 years later, and tragedy struck. That same year, my company nominated me for Salesperson of the Year for the North Carolina region. Our small but growing company, which had just become a market leader and was later bought by a national corporation, saw potential in me and gave me a $12,500 bonus and an all-expenses-paid trip to Washington, D.C. for a gala ceremony and dinner where the year's top seller would be announced. But 2 days before we were supposed to leave, things went wrong. First, Luke was diagnosed with whooping cough, and then Kelly got sick the next day. Despite the setback, I had to go to the ceremony. Amelia said goodbye to me on Friday morning with a heavy heart and told me to try to enjoy the next few days. When I got there an hour early, I told them I was going to be by myself. I got ready and put on the tuxedo I had rented. Then I went to the big hall and found a seat next to Nova from our Little Rock office. Most of the people there were older than me, but Nova was only 21 years old and had been working for the company for a year. Before the event, I only drank a few beers. At the dinner, they served wine, and I only had a couple of glasses. I was shocked when my name was called as Salesperson of the Year. I went up on stage and got a trophy and a $110,000 check while everyone cheered. When I got back to my seat, my bosses gave me a bottle of champagne. After that, I didn't remember much until I woke up at 5 a.m. the next morning next to Nova, who wasn't even dressed. I was scared and shocked, and I had a bad headache from drinking too much. I quickly packed my things and left within 20 minutes. When I got home 4.5 hours later, Amelia was shocked and angry. I told her what happened, but she didn't want to hear it. She just wanted to know the woman's name. I went back to work on Tuesday after dropping the kids off at daycare. When I got home that evening, Amelia was already there, acting like nothing had happened between us. If I tried to talk about it, she told me she would leave with the kids if I did. That night, she made love to me, but it wasn't as close as we used to be. It took many more months for that feeling to come back, but it did. The next year, Amelia graduated with her business degree and was eager to find a job that would let her use what she had learned. Our friendship with Charles and Diana grew, and we spent every weekend with them unless work obligations came up. Despite this, our wives continued to meet and spend time together, though it was harder for them to do so when Charles and Diana moved 15 miles away to be closer to his job. Amelia's parents also moved to the same area to be closer to her. Since Charles's business grew quickly, he needed someone to run the office and help him. Amelia was perfect for the job and did really well in her interviews. She got the job and did really well in it because she had been with the company for a long time and was close to Charles. People joked that she was Charles's work wife. This went on for 7 years until something bad happened. Diana died suddenly of a brain problem. She was visiting me that day, as she always did when Charles and Amelia had to go to work. We were all upset, but Charles was having the hardest time dealing with it and taking care of his 11-year-old daughter by himself. That's why Amelia planned to go to the Roberts house a few times a week after work to make sure everything was clean and make dinners that could be heated up quickly. 16 months later, I was about to leave the garage with the last box for my minivan when I stopped to see Amelia's car pull into the driveway. It was her first return since that embarrassing moment in the kitchen when she gave me the divorce papers. Of course, I didn't expect to see her today. "Amelia, aren't you breaking the restraining order by being here?" I asked her as she got out of the car. I asked, not tensely. "The order stopped being valid on the day we got divorced," she said, fiddling with her keyring. "How are you doing?" "You." I shrugged and said, "I'm just taking things one day at a time. Want some coffee?" As I walked back to the house, I asked, "Sure, that would be nice," she said as she followed me inside. The house was almost empty, with only a few boxes and a table left in the kitchen. We had sold most of the furniture and other things to neighbors and friends over the past few days, and now everything that was left was going to be thrown away. A friend's son, his wife, and a friend had offered to help, but I tried to say no. There was only one greeting card on the fireplace in the living room. We sat down in the same seats we had sat in person 16 months before, coffee mugs in hand. "So, what brings you back into my company on this lovely day?" I asked with a detached interest, not understanding why Amelia had come back after cutting ties with me suddenly. "Do you get it?" she replied, clearly annoyed. "You wrote letters to the kids about your move. Instead of mailing them something, why not just call them?" The only way to make sure they knew what was going on was to say, "Well, actually, I did both," I explained. "Otherwise, they might have thought I disappeared without saying anything." I laughed a little and then fixed what I said. "Actually, I contacted Kelly. I can't call Luke." Amelia looked puzzled and asked, "Why not?" "I don't have his number," I sighed. I told her, "The truth is, the kids don't want to stay in touch with me." Noticing her suspicious look, I added, "I'll just have to show my ex-wife how our kids really feel." I picked up my phone from the table and called Kelly on speaker. It went to voicemail after 10 long beeps. I hung up the phone and looked at Amelia. "Couldn't you try calling her? Would you mind?" She made excuses and then got her phone, called our daughter, and put it on speaker. "Kelly might just be busy," she said. It's interesting that her call was answered right away after the second ring. Kelly's happy voice asked, "Hi, Mom, how's it going?" "I'm good, honey. What are you up to?" "Well, Cassie and I are just hanging out right now. We have a party later, so we're just relaxing to save energy," my daughter said with a laugh and a hint of laziness. "Have you heard anything from your dad?" Amelia asked me with a raised eyebrow that meant something. "Yeah, I spoke to him last night. He said he talked to you and promised he'd pick up Cassie and me today. Yeah, in about 10 minutes. I think he's going to grab Luke later too before we all head to the party," Kelly said. It hurt so much when my daughter called him Dad. Amelia, who is always aware of things, saw how much it hurt when Kelly said it without thinking. I clenched my hands, leaned back in my chair, and stared blankly up at the ceiling. "You mean Charles?" Amelia asked, still sounding shocked as if she couldn't believe what she had heard. Kelly laughed again and asked, "Yeah, Mom. Who else?" "And you know what? He really likes it when I call him Dad. And you know he's going to officially be my father in 3 weeks," she told her mom. "It's true, my ex-wife was getting married again in 3 weeks. In fact, they sent me an invitation to their party." "Yeah, right. Like I'd really go," Kellyanne replied. "When was the last time you talked to your real dad?" Amelia asked quickly with a stern tone in her voice. "Mom, I don't remember. Maybe a few weeks ago," Kelly said, her tone changing from amused to worried because she could tell something was wrong with her mother's voice. I showed her my call log, which showed that I had tried many times but failed to get in touch with our daughter. "To be honest, none of my kids have called me since Amelia left," I said. "No calls in almost a year and a half." "That sounds strange because I just saw him try to call you a minute before I did. I'm sitting next to him right now." "Becky, what's going on?" The tone of Amelia's question was even harsher. "Oh, Mom, it's nothing. I just forgot," our daughter said through the speaker, her voice muddled and embarrassed. "I just want to remind you," her mother said sharply. "You only have one father, and it's not Charles." "We'll talk about this more later, young lady," she promised, stopping the call and the conversation in a clear, upset tone. "Why don't you have Luke's number?" asked Amelia as she pushed the phone away and turned it off. "Again?" she asked. FYI, Charles made sure Luke got a new phone and memorized his number within hours of his old phone being stolen, I added. If only I had known. It looks like they stopped loving me after a little over a year. "Listen, don't be too hard on the kids," I said with a sad smile and a tight grip on my fingers. "Your daughter told you that she's glad she has a new dad now. You know what they say. Out of sight, out of mind. It looks like Kelly has already forgotten about me." I showed her my long list of calls and said, "As you can see, I no longer have anything to do with the kids, and as far as I know, in 3 weeks, the real dad will take my place." The honesty in what I said hurt her, but it was necessary. "Since you left, I've probably only talked to them for about an hour total, despite my best efforts." I sadly said, "God, I really tried." I thought back to a typical time when I got tickets to the Braves game on the first day of the season. I was so excited, but when I called Luke to tell him, he said he was too busy to have fun. So I looked up and saw Amelia's frozen body across from me. He and Charles did go to that game, I found out later. They bought tickets at the last minute. So what if that's what they want? I can't make them do anything else. We were lost in thought for a moment before Amelia coughed and changed the topic. So you're leaving this place to be near your parents? Oh my God, did something happen to her? I asked, my worry clear in my voice. What does your dad do about it? You've never brought up any issues before. Well, at least Amelia cared about my parents, I told myself. Mom has advanced Alzheimer's disease. It's pretty bad because she doesn't remember much 90% of the time. Dad was buried a little over 3 weeks ago. The hospital said he had a heart attack, but I think he died of a broken heart because he was in too much pain and sorrow. Oh no! My ex-wife cried out in shock. How do you know it was a broken heart? Also, why didn't you call us? I rudely replied, of course I called. That was the last time I talked to Kelly, to be honest. The day after Thanksgiving. That's when I found out Luke had a new number. My conversation with Kelly was short, maybe a minute. She told me right away that she was busy and would call me back soon, but she never did. Not that day, or even a week from now. For a few weeks I called her every day until I found out why. I laughed and said, "It's funny that my kids blocked me on Facebook but not my dad." Later I found out Kelly was busy because she was going to the Black Friday sale with you and Grandma Roberts that day. It's easy for me to understand that my dad died of a broken heart. Our split was a secret to me. I never told my parents. I said this with tears in my eyes, but I never did. I wiped them away and took a deep breath before continuing. After you left, I went to see them the next weekend to talk about what happened between us in person. I found out how bad my mother's situation had become when I got there. Dad had told me before that she was forgetful, but since the last time I saw them, around Christmas, her health has gotten much worse. You must not have known this because you haven't been able to go to their place with me once in the last 3 years. I couldn't help but bring up the important reasons why Amelia couldn't always go with me and the kids, because my mom was sick when I took them there. We both know these reasons very well now. At that time, I didn't have the right to tell them both this news, and it got harder and harder to do so every week. Once Mom was asleep for the night after Thanksgiving dinner, Dad started to question me a lot. It had been over a year since he had heard from you or the kids, so I told him the truth about our breakup and your leaving. Amelia sat across from me with her hands over her mouth and elbows sharp on the table. She was as tense as a bowstring, and the only signs of life on her pale face were her trembling eyebrows. I found Dad in his favorite chair, holding our family photo. He was still crying. He was very sad about our split. Mom and Dad were married for 52 years, Amelia. It was at the funeral that I really felt how lonely I was. He was old-fashioned and had hoped that we'd be together until the end of our lives. Tears ran down my cheeks as I remembered that sad day. I jumped up and stared out the window at the pale blue sky with a few clouds. Amelia's sniffles and quiet sobs could be heard behind me. I leaned my head against the cold glass and complained. A chaplain and a few friends were the only ones there to say goodbye to Dad. No one else showed up. Mom wouldn't understand what was going on, so I couldn't even bring her. Mom didn't start to feel better until about a week or two after the funeral that I got the guts to tell her that her dad had died. Since it hurts her to think about it, I just tell her he went out and will be back soon when she asks. As Amelia cried openly, my tears had dried up a long time ago. Things had gone badly for me in the weeks before. My eyes wandered around the room until they fell on the single greeting card on the mantelpiece. Amelia's teary eyes followed mine and clearly noticed what had caught my attention. I kept talking in the same detached, distant tone, and even my mother doesn't recognize me. But I owe her something because she brought me into the world. Yes, I'm leaving right now to be with her for as long as she has left. I stood up straight and crossed my arms over my chest. I spoke to my ex-wife with a bitter, sarcastic frown. Isn't it amazing how many lives were affected by what you did? You destroyed our marriage, my relationship with my children, and on top of that, you broke up my family, I said as I ended my speech, unable to hold back the anger and angry tone I had vowed not to show. It still came out. Amelia got up from her seat and said, "Don't you dare blame me for all of this. Charles is committed to me, not you. And don't forget that you switched me out for Nova," she said, her face red as she pointed the finger at me. I was shocked when she accused me, and instead of defending myself, I laughed so hard that tears ran down my cheeks. "Sure," I said, trying to catch my breath. Let's not forget Nova, the reason you spent over 15 years planning your revenge. I thought back to the night you told me not to say her name in this house. If I did, you said you would take the kids and never come back. So I did. Well, Amelia, now that you've done everything you said you would, I think it's too late for that, my ex-wife said with a proud chin raise and crossed arms in defiance. Still, I want to be clear about one thing. I never touched Nova. As I said those words, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Amelia looked at me with wide eyes, shocked and confused. I felt like a weight had been taken off my shoulders. My suit from the night before was still on when I woke up in her bed that morning. There was no problem between us. "Are you sure I'll believe this?" Amelia asked with a sarcastic tone. When she snapped, "I don't care," sounding more like Kelly than the woman I used to know, I regained my composure. "Yes, I do," I replied firmly. "I've never lied to you before, and I don't have a reason to start now, especially since everything between us is over." Her response bothered me, even though I could tell she didn't believe me. It was important to me that she did. I picked up the phone and called my old office, telling Amelia to be quiet. After a few rings, the secretary Jane picked up. "Hey, Jane, it's Alex." "Hey, Alex, are you done getting everything in order?" "Good luck with the move," my old friend answered, likely getting ready for a big one. "It'll be weird around here without you," she sighed with sadness. "Yeah, everything's already packed. It was nice to catch up with an old friend before I left for the road. Please hear me out. I need to talk to a coworker at the Little Rock office. Would you please check the system to see if Nova is still there? I'm not even sure if she's still there," I inquired. "That sounds good, Alan. Hang on a sec," Jane responded promptly. For a few moments, the only sound on the line was the rapid clicking of keys. After a brief pause, she came back on. "Yep, she's still with us at the same branch in Little Rock. Do you want her number, or should I patch you through directly?" "Thanks a bunch for your help. Just put me through to her line. And Jane, sweetheart, take care of yourself. And if Paul ever decides to put a ring on it, I expect an invite," I said. Jane laughed and said, "Yes, Alan. Don't forget about us either, okay? Now patch me up." "Thanks, Jane," I said, ready to talk. As Amelia listened to our conversation, she frowned and kept her eyes on me the whole time. "Hello? Nova's on the line," said a voice I hadn't heard in years. "Hi, Nova. It's Alex from the Grenville office. I'm not sure if you remember me," I stated. Nova laughed and said, "Oh my goodness, Alex. How could I forget? I've been dreaming about you for years. The man I always wanted but never got. And now you call me out of the blue. How have you been?" she asked without waiting for an answer. "It's like telepathy because, believe it or not, I was just thinking about you recently. It's been, 16 years since we last talked at that fancy party where we first met. Remember, we ran into each other at a few other events afterward, but never got a chance to really catch up. You know how busy those crowded parties, important meetings, and all the other stuff can be." "Of course, I remember our first meeting in Washington," I told him. "In fact, it's been 17 years, I said with a laugh. Though besides the award ceremony itself, that night's a bit of a blur for me. Nova laughed out loud as she remembered. "Alan, you were a riot that night." "What do you remember?" she asked with a laugh. "Well, after my clumsy thank you speech, I remember leaving the stage, and then I think we were still sipping champagne at the table. But after that, it's all a bit fuzzy. It was probably the first and last time I got that drunk," I said, feeling embarrassed. Nova's laugh echoed over the phone. "By the end of the night, you were quite the character. But to be fair, you didn't drink that much compared to some others," she joked. "Well, Alan, if you want the truth, I'll tell you," Nova said with a sly tone of voice. "I have to admit, it's pretty funny. I had my eye on you that night, even though I knew all the other single women there were strong competition." Nova laughed and said, "Yes, of course. You were like a tall, dark, handsome magnet, attracting all the attention. It was like seeing bees swarm around a honeypot." Nova's memories made me laugh along, but I couldn't help but look at Amelia, who had her lips pursed as she listened. Her face turned angry when Nova talked about pulling me onto the dance floor. "Then, by accident, I swear, I put my hand on you and felt how solid you were," Nova said, still laughing. "Wow, things were getting pretty fierce, huh?" I told her. "Yeah, I almost fell over from that," I laughed. "Being called all night was weird, but it showed how loyal you were to your wife. Around 11, you started mumbling, 'Amelia, dear,' again, And then you passed out in your chair when the party ended after midnight and everyone went to bed. You were still in the hallway, so Nova called the night porter to help me get you to your room. I don't remember all of that, I told Nova, as she told me about that fateful night that Amelia and I would never forget. The tricky part was that no one knew which room you were supposed to be in, and the hotel computers were down for an update or something. I didn't go into too much detail about it. Long story short, the only logical thing to do at the time was to bring you to my room. And let me tell you, moving a guy your size. On the other end of the call, there was some rustling, and then Nova spoke again. It was funny when she said, "All these memories have made me a bit feverish and parched." Her voice was tinged with shame as she said, "So, where did I leave off?" "Ah, right there. Well, I have to admit I was feeling a bit mischievous at that moment. I mentioned earlier how I accidentally felt your, well, manhood when the receptionist and I were maneuvering you onto the bed. It was just a fleeting touch, but I immediately realized that you were not only tall, but also quite well endowed, if you get what I mean," she said nervously on the phone. "Unfortunately, you nearly passed out as we were getting you into the room, and then you just fell onto the bed, mumbling something we couldn't understand. You know, even though I was tempted, I couldn't do anything with someone who was practically asleep. It just felt wrong and against what I believe in. But I was a bit drunk myself that night and feeling, well, turned on. So I decided to undress and lay down next to you, hoping that when you woke up and saw me, it might spark something between us. But my plan didn't work because when I woke up in the morning, you were already gone. And when I asked around, no one had seen you for the rest of the weekend. So all I can say, Alex, is that your wife must be a very lucky woman," she said, covering her mouth with both hands when she saw what she had done. At that moment, I didn't feel sorry for my ex-wife because her own impulsive decisions and pride caused our marriage to fail, I stated. It made me believe it even more after all the things she did to get back at me. I saw that I had never really known her. "Oh, I see," I said. "Now she's my ex-wife. I probably would have taken you up on your offer if I knew then what I know now," I replied with a laugh. "If you want to start something new with me, it's about 7 years too late, honey. I'm now married and have 2 great kids. That's the last name I use at work. All of my clients know it. In fact, my real name is Nova Roberts. It was 8 years ago when I met Robert. He was the first person after you to win my heart," she said with some emotion. Amelia's tense forehead got creased as she gripped the table's edges, and her face turned into a painful grimace. She stared fixedly at the phone on the table as if it were a coiled viper ready to strike. I did not fully understand what Amelia's reaction meant. "By the way, Rob is the reason Friend, I thought about you. Isn't that odd?" She laughed. "Well, his older brother Charles is getting married in a few weeks, and his fiancée is also named Andy, but her last name is Dodd. She looked like a family member to me because you're the only person I know with the name Dodd." "It makes sense why Amelia responded that way," I said, "but I wouldn't know if it were true." "I don't have any family members named Andy," I joked with a wink to Marie. I smiled and looked at Amelia. "Now that I think about it, the only person I knew with that name was still in high school. It's been so long that I almost forgot about it. I guess I don't really know the realtor anymore, but no one would mistake Andy for a guy now. She's beautiful, and she has amazing kids, Kelly and Luke, who are in college now. Kelly and Charles's daughter, Cassie, are best friends and share a room in Florida. They were both bridesmaids in my wedding, and Luke was Rob's. He did a great job preparing the ceremony and entertaining the guests," I thought. Nova's last words, "Yes, a great guy, let me tell you," made me think as I automatically rose to her. Her voice became more serious and she spoke less loudly. "Actually, Alex, to be honest, I don't think they should get married because even if they go through with it, their marriage is doomed from the start," she added. I was shocked. "Why do you think that? They've been together for so long. What could stop them?" Amelia, who knew them better than I did, was even more shocked. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and she leaned forward tensely. "Lord, Alex, because they're both serial cheaters. I mean, Charles also cheated on his first wife, Diana, with Andy. I don't know how or why he did it, much less why he did it. Diana, I assure you, was also stunning, although I never actually met her. I saw her photographs. Anyway, Andy and I had a frank conversation about this one day, and she told me that her husband and children understand that she has a husband at work and a husband at home, She explained how she divided her time between the two of them, while her husband at home had a similar arrangement with a woman he worked with. Can you imagine that kind of relationship? Nova asked firmly. I said, yeah, to try to get Amelia's attention, but she kept avoiding my eyes. She looked ashamed, so her cheeks, neck, and even some of her chest were red. I told Rob that I would confront him if he ever thought about something like that, Nova said strongly. Then she said something unexpected, pointing the finger at my ex by accident. Well, Charles still has someone on his side, even though he's with Andy. That seems to be his way of doing things. I think he always has a backup plan, she said with a sigh. His current girlfriend's name is Tilly, and he sees her every time he goes to Chicago, according to what Rob told me. Apparently he plans these business trips just to see her every few weeks. As I watched Amelia's response, I saw her skin tone change from bright red to pale, and then to a hint of green. She was leaning on the table and struggling for air in silence. She looked like she was about to throw up right then and there. Nova kept excitedly telling me about the latest news from my old group of friends. Damn, I doubt they would have tied the knot if his bosses hadn't insisted he marry Andy after her ex sued the company following their divorce. Can you believe it, Alex? Her husband at home had a completely different take on their relationship and wouldn't tolerate the chaos. Some men still have integrity, huh? Rob confided that the company had to cough up a hefty sum to settle the matter. 100 grand, she joked. Just great, I thought. And on top of that, they gave Charles an ultimatum. He has to clean up the mess or they'll kick him out. What do you think? Not exactly the ideal foundation for starting a life together, is it? As Amelia stumbled into the bathroom, she jumped up and knocked over a chair. A few seconds later, I heard her throwing up. After what she learned today, her carefully built world had been shattered and literally flushed down the drain. I couldn't blame her. It turned out that Charles wasn't who she thought he was, more like a fake. That was no longer my worry, though, which was good. Nicole and I talked for a while longer. She told me about her kids and asked me what my plans were. I told her I was looking for a job at an insurance company near my mom's house. It wasn't like most sales jobs. I thought it would be interesting to look into strange insurance cases. It wouldn't pay as much as my old job, but I'd be happy with it. It was a good step forward in my work because I would have my own office and an assistant. When Amelia came back, she looked tired, and Nova and I were done talking. We agreed to stay in touch and gave each other our contact information. Sometimes, after I hung up the phone with Nova, I would look at Marie. Her face was pale and wet, and her makeup was all over the place. It was all over in 15 minutes. It seemed like Amelia had aged a lot in a short time. I felt bad for her as she sat down and put her head in her arms. You look really tired, I told her. This time she seemed really upset. She spoke softly and drowsily. I am, Alan. I am really tired. I do not have much time. I need to follow up on a lead while it's still fresh, I said. I should be in Brunswick by morning, I added quickly, checking my watch. It took about 6 hours to drive that far without stopping, but I knew I'd have to do that a few times. I pointed to the stacks of boxes in the hallway near the front door and said, "These are all yours. They hold all the clothes, photos, and other things you left behind. I'm going to send them to you next week, but since you're here, I can help you load them into your car if you'd like," I said in a calm voice, remembering how to be nice from my childhood. She didn't dare look me in the eyes, but she whispered, "Actually, can I ask you a big favor? Can I stay here for the night? I don't think I could go back home right now," I asked after playing with a set of keys on my finger for a moment. Then I picked out a couple and put them on the table in front of her. "Why not? Here are your keys and you can stay. But when you leave, you'll need to drop them off at the real estate office. Just so you know, new tenants are coming on Monday, so you have 9 days here if you need them. This Sunday, some people will help me get rid of stuff we don't need and clean the apartment. Utilities will work until Monday." Finally, I looked around the room again and chided myself. I picked up a card from my old coworkers from the wall. Their kindness still makes me feel good in my new home. I need to say goodbye to my ex now. As I left, I said, "I need to go. Goodbye. I hope we never see each other again." I saw the woman I used to love. Everyone I saw at the table was crying and looked very upset.